especially if you feel like you're overly emotional, and I don't mean that in a talking down to you way. I don't mean it that way. But if you feel like you're over emotional and you get stuck in emotions and it stops you from operating and doing things that you want to do, I think that's an opportunity to lean more into rationality. I'm not saying you ever have to be as far to the polarity as Alan is, because I don't know if you could.
And so people who are afraid to look like an idiot, unfortunately, they end up learning less because they're constantly trying not to look worse, which inevitably makes you worse. Because when you're playing basketball and you're not afraid to look terrible, you just get better much faster. Whereas if you're constantly concerned about not being good enough, you won't dribble with your left, you won't pass the ball, you won't whatever it is.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we help you level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. Today, for episode number 1980, I talk a little bit about rationality. I was on a podcast. Shout out to Josh. I was on his podcast 5 years ago, and I was back on his podcast today.
Nice.
And it was wild. What a good dude, just a good human. And we were talking about how I said, I think one of the biggest things that really jeffed me in life was assuming that if I got all the things that caused me trauma when I was young, if I went out and brought those home, I wouldn't have any trauma anymore. Just go away. So when I was young, I felt insignificant. We didn't have money. I went and tried to accomplish those things, assuming that my life would get better, and it didn't. And I said, I don't know if that's a hyper-rational way to think about it. I think it kind of is. Rationally, when I was young, I didn't have these things. These things created a void. If I go acquire those things, the void will go away. I feel like that's a hyper-rational way to think about it. Would you agree with that? Or at least rational?
Yeah. I think baseline rational, I think there's levels to rationality. Next level you. So level 1 is I didn't have these things as a child. They caused me pain not having those, so I'm going to go get those things and it will solve my pain. That's level 1 rational. Level 2 rational would be, okay, so those voids were a lot deeper than I originally thought. Getting those things isn't actually going to solve the internal void. And then level 3 would be, okay, having money, because I didn't have money growing up, this is just hypothetical, having money would solve a portion of it, but not all of it. And I think that would be hyper-rational, which would be just super accurate. Rationality is just accuracy.
But what's the difference between being rational and then just being emotional and wrong? What if that was just me, that was emotion, not rational?
It probably was. It was probably an overswing. So money caused pain growing up. Not having money caused pain growing up. Therefore, I'm going to go get rich to solve that. That's an overswing. Rational would be the center point. Rational would be, okay, not having money really sucked and it did cause a lot of pain. So let's make sure that we set ourselves up to have consistent income and a career that's sound and a solid retirement. But money's still not everything.
Okay.
We talk about Drive to 5 all the time. So the Drive to 5 is everything's a spectrum. There's no right or wrong. There's 0 to 10. And I actually did an analysis recently, which was really fascinating. So there's a couple that we coach that's having a wedding, and they are concerned about going over budget on the wedding. And we broke down a statistical understanding of how much they can expect probabilistically. I don't think that's a word, but statistically, in terms of wedding gifts. And I said, okay, on the low end, some people will not give you any gifts. On the high end, some people will give you thousands of dollars. Okay, you're having 175 people come. All right, let's say the average is 100. That means that some people will do 50, like a 50% or lower will do 100 or less. 50% or higher will do 100 or more. And we broke down the statistical sample set of how much money they're going to be able to make up so that they can have rationality in their wedding planning. Because they have a whole floor plan and it's a whole thing. They're crushing it. There's spreadsheets. It's great. And anyone who's planned a wedding, it sounds like a whole fucking thing. And you're just basically spending a bunch of money, the bus and catering and all this stuff. And you need to understand, okay, are we going to go over budget here? And are we screwed if we do? So let me rationally break this down and have high degree of certainty that, okay, if we put this $5,000 on a credit card, we're going to be able to pay that back right after the wedding because we're going to have gifts from the guests that come to the wedding. And I think that's just a hyper-rational approach to wedding planning, whereas most people planning weddings lose their minds because they're very dramatic and they get very scared and scarce and freak out that it's over budget. And so...
Are they going to sell their stuff that they get?
No, but there's monetary gifts. You know that. You guys...
Well, I think it's a percentage.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Of course.
Depends on what's on the registry. Is that a wedding registry? Baby registry?
Something like that. Exactly. But the point is they'll make some money. And they're most likely that here's the low end, here's the high end, here's the most probable, and then let's make decisions based on those numbers. And I think one of the reasons why rationality is so near and dear to my heart is because when you're irrational, you essentially almost guarantee that you can't achieve the outcomes that you want. So, for example, my irrational fear is being hated. But if I'm always afraid to be hated, I'm not going to be able to
Why
live
is
a
that
life
irrational,
that's true.
though? Why isn't that hyper-rational?
Well, I'm not always hated.
No, but isn't the fear of being hated super rational? I don't think that's irrational.
I think it's irrational if it's inaccurate. So if I unconsciously believe that if I say, hey, I'm an engineer and I'm type A and I'm an achiever and I don't really want to spend time at barbecues, it would be irrational for me to assume that everyone's going to hate me for saying that. It would also be irrational to assume that no one's going to hate me for saying that. Mm-mm. Like if you and I were constantly, we're going to lose all our listeners if Alan says that, that's irrational. It's wrong. It's inaccurate. But to assume that we can just jump on the mic and say whatever we want without any consequences is also dumb.
How do you measure the closeness to the polarity?
Measure everything. So listens. So we track listens every day. You track listens every day. I look at your sheet. And so we're at 1.17 million listens across our podcasts. We're averaging a certain amount per day now. And if those increase, I would try to look for evidence as to why that might be. If they decrease, I would look for evidence as to why that might be. And then if I was irrational, I would assume, that one episode where I opened up and was courageous, that we lost a bunch of listeners. That might be true. It might not. It's very hard to live in a world where you kind of can't measure the truth. One of the things, I'll be brief about this because I know we got to go soon, but I can't stand the fact that there's no direct competition in our space. Everything's so goddamn subjective.
Yeah.
I believe that our podcast is extremely valuable. Like, unbelievable. The amount of time and effort that we put into making sure this helps people as much as humanly possible each day is very high. But it's subjective. So it's very hard to measure that. Like, we can't go out, hey, listener who has been listening 5 years, let's measure how much success you've achieved with or without our show, and then let's go into fairy tale land and find out what you would have achieved without our show. It's impossible to measure. So the world is hyper irrational, unfortunately. And Kev says it's because I'm hyper rational that I think that. But when I say hyper irrational, what I mean is just very inaccurate. Like, so there's people out there that believe the world is flat. They're very irrational. They're very inaccurate. It's not flat. That's been proven. We've measured it
many times.
And exactly. And so why does it matter? Why does it matter to be accurate? I talk about this because if you're inaccurate, you can't make effective choices. If you buy a home that the basement is leaking and the roof is moldy, and you spend $1.5 million on it because you thought it was world class, and then you move in and you have to spend $150,000 on the roof and another $150,000 to fix the basement, you made a terrible choice based on inaccurate thinking. Thinking is the most important thing on planet Earth because human beings are the only animals that can do it, really. You've never seen a bear, like, planning its day.
I'm not familiar. I haven't spent a lot of time out in the wilderness, so what they do in their spare time, I'm not sure. But I'm willing to bet they're probably not. Yeah, they're probably not planning their days.
What is your take? Because again, I love rationality.
You're hyper rational. I think
yeah,
you're hyper rational.
It's my essence.
It's your essence.
It wasn't your essence.
It still isn't.
Okay.
It's still not as much.
That's why it's better for you to sell it than me, because I can't imagine a world where I'm not trying to think more accurately.
I just think awareness is the start. I don't. You got to figure out where you are right now. Like on a scale of 0 to 10, how rational are you? What's another good, accurate, but like grounded, tethered? What's another good word for rational? Because I think the definition dictates the experience often. Like rationality,
Logical.
that book.
Logical.
Perfect.
Logical. Yeah. Deductive reasoning. Again, I don't want to come off pretentious, but I do want to just be me.
Just ask me if I know. I don't.
Do you know
what
what deductive reasoning means?
Yes, but the Sherlock Holmes. But
yeah.
I didn't at the beginning.
Okay, so your video looks like shit.
Thank you.
And the reason why is because you have not yet done enough deductive reasoning to find out the root cause of your shitty video.
Correct.
And when you do find the reason why it sucks, you can now solve it.
I may jump out the window first, honestly.
Well,
you know.
Hello, NLU listener. Thank you, as always, for listening to Next Level University. Real quick, I just want to jump in and let you know about the Next Level Dreamliner. This is a journal that I use every single day. Achieve your dreams 90 days at a time. It breaks down your dreams into goals, milestones, and daily habits. We hope you enjoy it. The link will be in the show notes. All of us have problems, right? We have, my left knee hurts. Okay. This happened. Okay, I'm wasting time. Okay, the world is all just problems. Problems and opportunities are the same thing. So we have an opportunity to get a new $5,000 client. Well, the only way that we can do that is if we solve a problem. Okay, what's the problem? We have to figure out a way to do this giant scope of work for them. And by the way, we're solving their problem for $5,000 a month. The moment that's not worth it to them, they're going to can us. And they should. I just live in a world where I don't understand. One thing that I'll share too, really briefly, is I do systems thinking and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, clients come to me, they say, I want to achieve this goal. And I say, okay, you have to do this, this, and this to achieve that goal. And they say, well, I don't want to do that. And I say, well, then you can't achieve the goal. There's no world where you get to achieve things without doing the things necessary to achieve them. And I think that that's very irrational for them to think they could. And this is why kids of wealthy families tend to be very irrational, because they didn't actually do what was necessary to build the generational wealth. It's like we live in a very wealthy country, so we have benefits just from where we were born. And we're very irrational about that if we're not careful about it. Like, you have running water.
I do.
Everything's great. Like, we have beautiful streets and sidewalks, and people are like, oh, well, you know, I can't believe our sidewalks aren't It's like, well, some places don't even have sidewalks. You're very entitled. Like, why do you get sidewalks? Has anyone ever actually unpacked why? Well, someone has to pave those. Okay, well, who pays for that? Well, the government. Okay, well, who pays for that? Okay, well, taxes. Okay, well, who pays for that? The upper middle class, unfortunately. Okay, well, who pays for that? Okay, well, the people who make the jobs. Okay, well, who makes the jobs? Well, the entrepreneurs. Okay, well, why does that work? Okay, well, the government, legislative, judicial. You have to understand everything in order to understand how it all works. Otherwise, you're the chess piece instead of the chess master.
I just think it's a big ask to understand all of it, you know?
Yeah, it is. It's tough.
And
but if you don't, you're screwed.
Yeah, but
that's
most
the unfortunate part.
Nobody gets more rational just to get more rational.
If they were sold it, they would. Like, if you've just become more rational. When we first met, you were just off the rails.
Goals, though. That's the goals. It's not, I don't want to be. It's not that I want to be more rational.
Yeah, rationality is a necessary improvement, a necessary thing that has to improve for you to achieve your goals. But you won't have goals unless you have self-belief. And if you don't have self-belief, you won't ever end up rational because
there's a pyramid. Yeah, there's a pyramid. It's self-belief, self-worth, and then, like, eventually I think you get to rationality.
It's almost like self-belief is step one, and then setting a goal beyond your current circumstances is step 2.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then becoming rational enough to break that down into small incremental improvements or steps. And then you go on that journey and learn, oh, I was wrong about this, and this. So now I'm more accurate about this, and this. So then you can set a bigger goal.
I think it's the other way. I think you start highly irrational and then you get more rational as you go.
Agreed. But this is one of the reasons why I've had a hard time articulating to people that it's really good to be wrong. Being wrong means it's unfortunately, socially, it's not good.
Yeah.
Socially, you look like an idiot, which apparently is really important. Like, looking like not an idiot is really important, apparently.
Of course.
I feel like I look like an idiot all the time because I just don't care. I'm looking for where I'm wrong. Always. Because that's how I get better. I can't make better choices unless I identify where I'm an idiot. And so people who are afraid to look like an idiot, unfortunately, they end up learning less because they're constantly trying not to look worse, which inevitably makes you worse. Because when you're playing basketball and you're not afraid to look terrible, you just get better much faster. Whereas if you're constantly concerned about not being good enough, you won't dribble with your left, you won't pass the ball, you won't whatever it is. Again, dumb metaphor, but one of the things that is really hard for me is the social world versus the real world, because in the real world, it doesn't matter if you are sucking in the moment. What matters is that you're learning and growing. But socially, it's so devastatingly hard to be a successful business coach and then talk about all the things you're fucking up.
Well, I think but for somebody who's struggling with rationality, it's kind of the same thing. Like, if you surround yourself with a bunch of people who are super emotional, it's going to be really hard to practice rationality with them without being villainized.
Yeah, and then you
or minimize
identify that you are an emotional person, and then you don't want to be around rational people because they seem
but I think
mean or cold.
It minimizes. Like when you don't mean to do this, and you and I, we've talked enough, but when it's like, well, air travel is the safest form of travel. It's like, that doesn't help me.
It doesn't. It has to a little. I mean, you're not going to die in a plane, statistically speaking.
I'm not afraid.
You're more likely to get struck by lightning tomorrow.
But that doesn't matter. That's not the way I think about it necessarily. I'm not going to get struck by lightning. I don't leave the house. I'm not going to get I'm not worried about getting struck by lightning.
But it doesn't help at all to know that you're more likely to die in your car than in an airplane?
No,
by a significant margin.
Yeah, but I know that. It's not that. No. It's the fact that if I get into a car accident, I'm in control and I'm on the ground.
That's an illusion. You're in way less control in a car than you are in a plane in terms of mortality.
Yeah, I understand. But it's,
again, this is all math. It's just math. Like, in my head, if I was to bet money that someone would be alive in 100 years or 50 years, and one of them does airplane travel and one of them does car travel, it's every time the airplane would win.
But it's hard. Time. It's hard to over rationalize when you're in a moment of emotion, I think.
Yeah, because fear makes us irrational.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm so afraid to be villainized. I think it makes me irrational.
And I think it's the same with me with certain fears. It's like, I know it. I know the plane's not going to crash. I know. Yeah. But it doesn't.
Yeah, it's like when people say, why do you care what people think? It's, well, easy for you to say. Yeah. You haven't been shit on your whole life.
Or when people say, well, whatever, like, imagine you have a presentation at school. Like, it's not going to kill you. It's like, I know it's not going to fucking kill me. I'm not worried about dying. I'm worried about being embarrassed and being a pariah from my school. I'm not worried about dropping dead. I know that's not going to happen. Shit, I'd rather that happen. At least I don't have to worry about it. All right, you gotta go. You have a call. You have a call in 1 minute.
I enjoyed this a lot, but of course I did because I love rationality.
I know. So. This would be the takeaway I would give to everybody watching or listening. Alan is on the very, 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 very high end of this. So I don't think it's. Just try to move a little bit more, especially if you feel like you're overly emotional. And I don't mean that in a talking down to you way. I don't mean it that way. But if you feel like you're over emotional and you get stuck in emotions and it stops you from operating and doing things that you want to do, I think that's an opportunity to lean more into rationality. I'm not saying you ever have to be as far to the polarity as Alan is, because I don't know if you could.
Last question.
Yeah.
You, 0 to 10, how rational were you when you started the podcast versus now?
I was probably like a 1. I'm probably like a 7.
How are things going? Pretty good? I'm joking.
In some ways, yeah.
I know that sounds condescending.
No,
I'm
no,
being
you're good.
playful.
You're
I'm being
good. You're
playful.
good. In some ways, yeah. Yeah, the ignorance is bliss thing. I know it's a dumb thing. I'm telling you, it's kind of true. It's kind of true.
Where are you at now, 0 to 10?
I'd say probably like 7. I don't know. I'd ask you. You probably know better than I based on this.
Yeah,
the shit
way
that I
more,
say.
way more. Significant. I would say that's what's come up the most.
But there is also a downside now. There's
Yeah.
downside in everything. There's downside in everything.
Yeah, sometimes it seems more boring. I understand.
Right?
There's less drama, less chaos, less.
It's not as
frolicking.
exciting.
Yeah,
But-
agreed.
That on the other end of that, it's also not as jarring.
Or as wildly detrimental to
Or
your
as
future.
what? Yeah. So there are definitely benefits. I just don't. I know when you get super passionate about stuff, it's like,
Yeah,
you go
I
to
know.
the fucking end. It's like, everything's math. It's like, for you it is, yes, but whether you're watching or listening, not everything. You don't have to see equations everywhere
That's
you
me
go.
dialed down. Dude. That's
Well,
me dialing it way down.
I understand. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. But I respect that. I just want to make sure
Yeah,
people
of
don't
course.
think that's where they have to get to.
Yeah, I'm not saying you have to be calculating every single thing. I would say you would benefit from calculating more, though, for sure.
Fair.
That's
fair.
Absolutely.
That's a fair. We could slap that shit on a bumper sticker, throw a little NLU logo on it, and boom.
Maybe we'll have bumper stickers one
Never
day.
will
Who
we
knows?
have bumper stickers.
No?
No, I would
Bumper
not allow
sticker
it.
self-improvement. Be more rational. Or not. Huh?
We'll see. Keep your eyes out for the Next Level U bumper stickers.
Fly planes, don't drive. I'm joking.
Yeah, I'd rather drive drive 12 hours than fly 3. Just the way
We almost did that when we were in Florida. That was wildly irrational.
I wanted to. So
You were
bad.
ready. You were ready.
Who cares? It was like, let's do this. All right. Next Level Nation, as always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. NLU, United Fans. We have family. We'll talk to you all tomorrow.
Stay next level. Next Level Nation.